Welcome to News9 Mediaverse, and you are watching To The Point, and I am Kartikeya Sharma. Today we are going to discuss two things on Manipur. The first is the observation made by the Supreme Court of India, and the secondly is the march which took place in Manipur against the barricades and blockades. You know, there was a press release from Kukizo, they are calling it line of control. So my question is, why should one community call anything called line of control? There is no line of control in one country. Any community can go anywhere. And secondly, isn't the time has come to lift those blockades? Because ultimately, you know, one community cannot restrict that the other community cannot come here. That's not correct. If people from the Imphal Valley wants to go to the hill areas, they have all the right to be there. But then something is even of more importance. Let me read out certain things of the court observation, and then I'll introduce my show To The Point with all the guests. Now, SC asked Manipur government to act against illegal arms. Basically, it says we are looking at it, as we have said repeatedly, that we are not concerned with the source of wrongdoing. We are concerned with the fact that there has to be accountability for wrongdoing. We are not concerned with the source of human suffering. Irrespective of the source of human suffering, everybody has to be dealt with on a uniform basis, said the CJI Chandrachud. He is saying we want accountability. Investigation of crime, dealing with various aspects of human suffering, recovery of arms, providing compensation. These have to take place across board, irrespective of who the person genuinely in need is. Now, that is one part of it. In this, the court has asked Manipur government for a status report. Not only asking them to act against illegal arms irrespective of the affiliations of those who are stocking or using them, and sought a status report on them from August 7. There is also one very important thing. Today, Senior Advocate Sanjay Hegde told the bench that while the August 7 order only referred to arms in control of the state, that's the other part of the story. The real problem is that there were a lot of arms in militant camps which were jointly patrolled by the state, and those militants now, what has happened is that the militants have entered those camps, taken away the arms, and because it does not fall within the exclusive jurisdiction of the state, those arms are being paraded on Independence Day, and that is what is adding to the violence. The court clarified it meant arms not just from the state armories but from all sources. That is one part. The second part is the march which took place. And isn't the time has come, at least those barricades should be off. I'm very happy that on this discussion, after a long time today, I'm joined by my three panelists, Rami Niranjan Desai, author, writer. How are you, Rami? A long time.
Very well, thank you.
A very warm welcome to you. Professor Prasannaji, thank you so much, sir, for giving time.
Sure, thank you.
And Dr. Gwite, thank you, madam, for coming again on my show. Yeah. And this time I'll ask Rami to open. She has joined us after a long time. Rami, tell me, these two things are important. One is the issue of arms, looted arms, and court saying, you know, you just get them back, fix accountability, what has happened. And court says, and the court very categorically says that act against illegal arms irrespective of who is stocking or using them. So that is one. And secondly, today's strange development when the barricades were being challenged. I was just thinking, theek hai, the state government has stopped them. Yes, law and order issue. But then there was a press release which came out which says the line of control, and I felt very offended. What is this line of control in a state? There is no line of control in India. There is only one we have on the western border. Rami.
Quite right. Good evening to both of you. It really has been a long time, and much has developed in Manipur and much has stayed the same. And I think you're quite right in pointing out what the Supreme Court has said. I think this is what we've been saying on your show, Kartikeya, and Brijesh has been there as well, where we've been saying that, you know, the retrieval of the arms that have been looted has to be first priority for any sort of way forward. We've also said that it's not just about the arms that have been looted, but, you know, there obviously has been information, call it rumors, call it whatever you want to, that illegal arms and ammunition has been coming from across the border, or they are being made on site. which isn't very difficult to do nowadays, as we know. And that is of primary importance to Manipur to be able to see some peace. But if you remember, time and again, I have also said that this cannot be, or the situation cannot be the sole responsibility of the state. Of course, the state is a major stakeholder and it needs to do what it needs to do to make sure that the people of the state as well as the country, because these borders are so important, are safe and secure and not being manipulated by any outside influence. And we've seen this in the Northeast before. So this is not conjecture or speculation. But the responsibility alongside also lies with civil society. People know who have these arms. People know who are using it, even if they're using it for protection. At the end of the day, when tempers are at this point, it is very difficult, to ensure that they are not misused. And therefore, I think this responsibility lies on both sides, and this is something that we need to understand. Number two, about this march, of course, as you know, that I have always said that I am against any sort of provocation at this end, and it doesn't matter whether it comes from one community or another community. Provocation when things are so tight, when tempers are still flaring, and even though I think the larger parts of society want peace and want calm, there are elements and there are community representations that are emotionally and are sort of induced by what has happened. So let me just say this, as much as I don't think a march was needed at this point, I think it is really important that we understand that this sort of line of control, like you rightly said, is absolutely unacceptable. And to prevent one community to go into another area or vice versa is only creating complications for the future. Today is Janmashtami. Janmashtami is hugely important for the Manipuris. And let me quote this, Raji Bhagyachandra, one of the most important monarchs of Manipur, had said that, this land doesn't belong to anybody, but it belongs to Lord Krishna. And therefore, dividing or bifurcating or segregating the land of Manipur is akin to almost dividing Krishna. And on this day, I am sure this has been felt very deeply by one community. Having said that, I'm not justifying that the march should take place, or I think negotiation or some amount of dialogue would reap better benefits than this sort of more what would be seen as an aggressive stance. But again, we have to understand land is a very emotional issue, and therefore preventing one community over the other from accessing land that communities feel that they've been attached to time in memoriam is only making this situation complicated. I think the way forward has to be able to secure and ensure that displaced persons can go back to where they were displaced from, and communities have a huge hand to play in this. So, Karthike, I would really, this would be my limited point on this, that, we have to understand that land is a hugely sentimental issue, and this sort of bifurcation is not going to end well, nor is it going to be sustainable.
Jayesh, your thoughts? There are two things. One is the development in the court which took place, in which court is saying वो audit दीजिए, बताइए ये कहाँ गया है, accountability fix करिए. उन्होंने बोला जो लेके गया accountability fix कीजिए, ये court का कहना है. And the second, within that, Sanjay Hegde is saying that, a part of it, armory is accountable, but the ones where the Sioux militants have held their weapons, they have been lost, those are not accounted. That's the second part. The third part of the conversation is the march which was stopped. 3.
Well, Karthike, we have been discussing for a very long time now that how those arms which have been looted, given, surrendered, whichever term you want to use it, are a key problem now as far as the law and order issue is concerned. It's heavily, both sides are heavily armed, and there is no way, because all it requires is one person to induce chaos in the entire system, and then bring back the frayed tempers at full display. And that is, if the Supreme Court forces embracing government to do a massive crackdown, ensuring that that weapons are being recovered from both sides. I think nothing better could be done than this.
Perfect.
And there should be a crackdown, because a message ultimately has to be sent down that come what may, irrespective of your grievances, irrespective of your hurt feeling, irrespective of how you imagine a particular scenario to be at a place, you cannot use violence to support
Okay.
that. If you use that, then that is completely not done.
Okay, then what about the march which took place today?
I agree with Rami, when she says that, that if you take out a march, right now, when the, I wouldn't even call peace, when the situation is so fragile, Kartikeya, right now, this will only add to the flare up. And this is something which should be avoided at all costs, because the ultimate aim is peace in Manipur, not ensuring that, that this is my right and nobody can take it away from me. But having said that, I also agree with what you said, that that no ethnicity can say that this is the line of control. I think line of control is between the two states, which Manipur borders, or the international line, international border with Myanmar and others. But there can be no two line of control.
I found that offending
within the state of Manipur. That is not acceptable.
I found that offending. Dr. Guite?
Yes, Kartike. Before coming to the march, I just want to begin by saying that with virtually all organizations, groups and individuals, be it national parties, national and international medias, and famous personalities, international organizations, human rights bodies, including the UN human rights experts, and even the Indian security forces, acknowledging that the ongoing state-sponsored violence is targeted towards the minority Zhou tribals. So it is simply absurd for the majority Métis community, to kind of still pressing to block, to object to lifting the blockage, and also demonizing the minority tribals as perpetrators. And we have seen that in the hill areas, they may say
अच्छा
that
डॉक्टर गुते, मैं आपको रोक नहीं रहा हूँ. You'll have the time. Let me read out one thing for you. फिर आप बताइएगा ये सही है या नहीं. It says, and I'm reading this out. The it says Kokumi has issued a press statement expressing the intention to provoke unrest around LOC. This is Zomi Chief Association. We hereby convey a stern warning to Kokumi: do not cross the line of control. We advise you to remain within the boundaries of Kangri Park and respect territorial integrity of our tribal ancestral land. I mean, so there is one land called Manipur. I mean to say, Rami, I know Rami made a point in context of Lord Krishna, but there is also the territorial, I would make it a constitutional point. There is one state of Manipur. Rami spoke in that context of how we imagine our homeland to be, how we imagine our ancestral land to be. I am just speaking from a constitutional point of view. There is no LOC. I mean, Bijesh is right, avoidable है, लेकिन वो LOC तो नहीं हो सकती. मेरा ये मानना है डॉक्टर गुते. You can't have an LOC.
I'm not saying about the LOC. You are talking about lifting the blockage and the buffer zones which is there, right?
Yeah,
so
I'm
when
just
we
saying that the press release which came out, it says LOC. So I was just saying, I mean to say, why do you use words like that? We are all, you are sociologists, historians, I am a journalist. We live in this multi-social media verse where narratives are built and then people imagine those narratives as facts, and the fiction become facts. There is no LOC. It's one Manipur.
Yeah, the LOC which is referred in the context of, let's say, if you contextualize it, the kind of LOC which has been always between India and Pakistan. So it's the situation in that it kind of reflects the gravity of the situation over there. If the press release at all use that line of control, the buffer zone as a line of control. So here, that is what something that needs to be respected in terms of when there is so much of grave danger which is felt by the minority tribal groups. And in terms of still, refusing, objecting to lifting the blockage, you are compromising on the lives of the basic, on the lives of the people. There are shortage of life-saving drugs. There are shortage of food. People may say that people living in Churchandpur district who are living in the Lamka town may be getting supply from Mizoram or from Aizawl. But what about people living in Tengnopal or in Moreh?
Dr. Gute, that day I had a discussion, and the reason why I'm asking is, we and Brijesh criticized कि गलत था कि जो वहाँ those were Kuki families living, they should have been provided more security. They should not have been ferried away to safe areas. The job of the state should have been to give them more security. But if Maitis want to go back to their land in hill areas, they should be allowed to go back there. It also belongs to them. Kisne kehte hai the valley only belongs to Imphal? Maitis can also live wherever they want to, isn't it, Dr. Prasanna ji? Professor?
Yes. You see, I mean, we should not read much into that expression LOC, though LOC is a militarized expression, and such an expression has no place in a kind of a flare-up also between two societies who have fallen apart for some historical reasons and contextual reasons at this moment. But what is at stake is maintenance of peace, and in order to maintain peace, a certain kind of a distance, a certain temporary separation is advocated by security agencies and by the police and other state-funded agencies. Now these agencies have this fragile task of maintaining peace. It will become impossible for them if one side is just allowed to run over the other side. Now, given that situation, the whole press release and counter press release, etc. has come. One has to look at the ground reality all the time. That will guide us where we are. And at this moment, you can see even few days back, a few Kuki families had to be removed from Imphal Valley. Similarly, you mentioned that Maitis who want to return to Lamka or to Churachandpur should have this right to return. Actually, this requires now an institutional framework, a framework of reparation, where the affected parties, affected families, affected communities are taken due care of and their rights are legally granted. Now, Supreme Court has pronounced, and it has left the task to the state government and other central government agencies. But I don't see use of a concept of reparation, which is a must in this kind of a situation. A concept like non-refoulement really needs to be brought in so that people who are already victimized are not re-victimized. Now, this entire fragile situation of running over into each other and using guns, that to illegally stockpile gun and other kinds of arms, etc., is still continuing in a very hideous manner, in a secretive manner. Now, state has to enhance its surveillance machinery. And there the question of neutrality also has come into picture. Some people are saying Assam Rifles is not neutral. So if central government forces are not neutral, you see the whole idea of Indian state and Indian democracy, where we have a federal structure, we have a central government which is vicariously responsible for maintaining security. If they are doubted and they are given a kind of a allegation. Similarly, on the other side, one has seen videos where certain kind of undesirable elements are moving with the state police forces. So what is happening? It's a complete subversion of the norms of security that has happened. Now, we need to restore the basic security mechanism and human security as well. We need to restore confidence. We need to rebuild those camps where a lot of support system needs to be given, a lot of medicine, food have to be supplied, which Supreme Court has pronounced few daed back. So all this basic work needs to be carried out. Without that, people are talking about LOC still, which is highly concernful. I would say that people should look at well-being of each other instead of provoking each other and trying to victimize each other. That kind of situation should have come to an end now.
Today I can say that Manipur police did a good job. Today Manipur police did a good job. There were hundreds of trucks that were being mobilized all across. The reports were there in the morning, and at number of places, people had come out. But even then, to organize it, to ask them to go back, I think they had a very tough situation on their hand. Rami, if I am audible to you, I understand that the weapons are an issue, but then ultimately there are people who want to go outside the valley. Those issues also needs to be addressed, isn't it?
Karthike, absolutely. I've had my finger up for so long because I find a lot of the things that have been said making the situation sound so simple that it isn't. When somebody uses the word LOC, we have a problem on our hands.
I have a
This
problem.
is not. This is not the kind of language that is acceptable, either to the state of Manipur, to the larger population in Manipur, tribals or non-tribals. The people who are giving out notifications like this certainly are not representatives of all the tribal community. So this is a huge narrative building exercise, and this is what brings about suspicion in people who are observing this conflict, in policymakers and other such educated people's minds, that there's a larger agenda to this, because nobody uses words like this or makes comparisons to the India-Pakistan line of control. I mean, we are, this is not this is also provocation, in my opinion, and this is also leading to a very dangerous dialogue that we cannot afford to entertain whatsoever. So I really lodge my strong objections to the use of LOC or anybody defending the use of LOC. This is not as simple as it looks. This is leading to something bigger, and which is what we've always spoken about, is the territorial integrity of not just Manipur, but it is the territorial integrity of India, and we need to look at it from that point of view. Number two, when we talk about, people giving us stamps of approval, I again have a serious objection. You want to give a stamp of approval to the Editors Guild, which has had 4 FIRs put on it, simply because it sides with one party and doesn't side with the other. You want to give a stamp of approval to international organizations because they put this colonial sponsored lens of majority versus minority, one religion versus the other. When
I had a huge objection to that. I did a special program on it yesterday when they said Meiti who are primarily Hindus and Kukis who are primarily Christians. I said this, there was no point. Why was that mentioned?
Karthike, that is exactly my point of view. When such false binaries are imposed and superimposed on communities as ancient as the Kukis, as the Metis, as the Nagas, the communities together should be objecting to it. They should not be in any way supporting this sort of a take. So I don't care what the United Nations says. I don't care what any international body says. I've said this on your show before. The European Union had 5 representatives. Not one checked their background. Not one was an expert on tribal affairs, on the Northeast, on Manipur, let alone had ever visited India. That is the kind of support that people are wanting. I don't accept that. Number 3, we talk about, we also said that Kukis were evacuated from Imphal. Of course, I don't think anybody should be evacuated or anybody should need to leave their homes, because that is really a signal of us losing control. But having said that, ITLF also complimented the forces for that swift evacuation, and their homes are guarded by security forces, ensuring that no vandalization happens. I wish this was the case in other areas as well, and that has not been the case. So I think, instead of making these sort of lopsided arguments that, we have the support of international parties, LOC is not a problem to use, I think we have to look at it from a very balanced and logical manner, that where is this heading? Is this kind of nomenclature, is this kind of labeling going to help the cause? Trust me, this usage of LOC is going to have far greater repercussions than we understand. And therefore, as seriously as we must take it, is in the same tenor how we should discuss it. Not minimalize it to this much of an extent.
Dr. Gwite, sorry I had cut you short earlier. Please come in.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to add on to what Rami argument in terms of the use of the word LOC. So see, building on the argument, one can say that because as per the term, or as Professor Biswas has said, it's a militarized way of using that. But the context here is that LOC is in the mind of the people. People are so divided. Although the words may be offensive, but the feelings are like this. Here, LOC means the divide in the minds of people, not a border. we respect constitution. Government has to make efforts to settle people in their lands. So cookies, Joe should also be allowed to come back to Imphal. But unfortunately, the poor cookies or people are not even able to bury their relatives whose bodies are still lying in the morgue for the last 4 months. Government has to provide security to them. Like Meiteis are moving with heavy arms to Lamka. Imagine if cookies come to Imphal with similar kind of arms and ammunition. So it is the duty of the government to move the people to their places. A mob moving to the areas with weapons is not justified. Although Supreme Court has instructed Biren Singh government to recover arms and ammunition, but the result is zero. No major recovery took place while people are roaming with stolen weapons and on the streets. So this is the situation. So it's not about the international organization saying or the human rights activists coming in, everyone. It doesn't mean that you kind of, they come in. How can you nullify the credibility of such organizations? So it's a clear case of state-sponsored violence. Otherwise, how can it go on till 4 months? I think it's in the history of India that such a long ethnic violence is taking place in Manipur. How can this go on without the support of the state government? So the state government is answerable to the ongoing violence and it has to stop it. And if you want peace to come in, they have to admit what have they done wrong? Where have the wrongs going on? Then only justice and peace can come into the state. So, until and unless we address the root cause and who is taking what side, or now if you come to the kind of FIRs which has been filed against either to be scholars or now coming with the latest of Editor Guild's India reports. I mean, is this the way that the state government should be functioning? FIR against FIRs? I mean, you are trying to stop people from the freedom of expression. If they don't report facts, then what will they report? Do they have to create story from what the state wants them to give the narrative? So these are some of the basic questions that as a civil society that we need to address. So that's my point.
Okay. Dr. Gite, before I give chance to Rami and before I give chance to Professor, I would like to say one thing, because I did a program. I, as a journalist, I am opposed to these FIRs. You can't have FIRs for, writing reports. But if you ask me the quality of the report, I have issues with it. If you ask me about the quality of that UN report, I have issues with it. If you ask me about the quality of that Editors Guild of India's report, I have issues with it. Not the pictorial, but the way it was written. I have issues with it. I am against FIRs. I completely agree with you. And I am putting this on record, lest someone says ki chup ki baithe. Yesterday and day before yesterday, I did a program. I said those FIRs are wrong, but the quality of report, boss, lot needs to be done. Rami, to you, and then to the professor. Rami.
Karthikeyan, my limited point is that I don't think we can look at this LOC as a part of their imagination, because you cannot geographically cross that line. So this is not just limited to an imagination or a psychological divide. This is a geographical divide, and that is serious business. Do you think I can cross these areas? I can't. And I am from neither of the communities. So the only people that can cross these areas safely are people that are considered to be able to give a report that is demonizing one community over the other. And that's what the Editors Guild did. And that's why it's being hailed only by one community. I am sorry, that was a very shoddily put together report. And I will talk about the picture also. You don't even do basic background check. It demonized one community, and I don't think you need that sort of demonization of any community at a time when we are saying, all of us in this panel are saying that it's a very sensitive time for any provocation. So you cannot compliment that if you have the best of your state in mind. Number two, when we bring in international organizations, we have to look at not just the impact on Manipur, but what they are trying to do with the entire sentiments of the country. What was the need for that European Commission report to ask for the release, when they are talking about Manipur, of some Kashmiri journalist? I mean, does that not make it clear to a neutral observer like me? It makes it clear that that report is dubious. So I think the less importance that we give to any international body, the less importance that we give to some of these reports that come out that are demonizing one community over the other, I think the better we will be for it. But coming back to the border situation, to this line of control, I mean, I don't think any responsible citizen of this country, let alone Manipur, can have absolutely anything positive to say about division within our own state lines. And I think that spells trouble, and we must look at it like that.
Professor Prasanajit, coming back to this issue, this comes in this actually comes in wake of complete transfer of population that has happened. Now, in this case, how do people go back to their respective places? There are people who want to go back to other areas. If you say that this is where you cannot go, it means that internally you have stopped the movement of people. And even if the one community wants to go to the other place, they are well within the right to do so, isn't it? Even if I give in, the other doesn't want to do democratically, they don't want to do, and the other one wants to do, they have the right to do so.
Now, problem here is that, when a certain community tries to move in, and that movement towards, certain habitat, if that creates a kind of a security risk, if the assessment says so, and if there is a response and counter response, a logic of retaliation and a psychological divide and a deep divide at work, in such a situation, temporarily such movements are not healthy. These movements rather would show that one side is trying to run over to the other side, which is unnecessary. Rescuing people and restoring their homes is another matter. This is not a matter of enforcing something and using force. Here, a certain amount of force is being seen to be used, which is not necessary. And such a force and mobilization, when security agencies are struggling to maintain peace and trying to keep the two conflicting groups a little separate, so that a dialogue, some kind of a peace process can work and bring them together back and restore normalcy in Manipur. In such a situation, the question of right is right to peace, right to healthy life, right to safety. Minus all those rights, we cannot just think about moving into a territory where there will be some security issue because of that movement. So since May 3rd, this normal movement across territories have come to a certain kind of a restriction. So movements are restrictive in various areas for certain kinds of people for the reasons of conflict. Now we have to dispel the fear of conflict. We have to dispel this insecurity. If we are able to do that using our security mechanism in a judicious manner, in a manner that have confidence in each other, that they are not going to be suspicious of each other. You see, government offices in Manipur Valley, Imphal Valley, other communities are still very much afraid to join offices. Certain organizations have demanded that people should not attend offices. Now you see, there is all the time some kind of machination by which a kind of insecurity is created. New ways of machinating, reproducing insecurity is all the time created by blocking, by creating some obstruction, by playing on sentiments, by creating a kind of psychological divide. All the time that is being played on. And state here is not actually stopping it. Rather, one should say that they are complicit in some way. Now this is a very, very strange situation. This has never happened before. So one must really bring into the table the situations in which psychological divide is deepening, the reasons, the factors because of which such divide is deepening, and also certain kind of acts of provocation that are replicating the situations of conflict all the time and creating disturbances, psychological insecurity being propagated in the form of public discourse. Such things needs to be brought to an end, and rather a discourse of peace, a discourse of harmony, a discourse about how people can secure their own rights, their autonomy. All this needs to be brought into. Instead of that, something else is coming in picture.
The reason why I don't ask this question, Brijesh, is because I don't find civil society activists, creating a sort of a cross community sort of a packet of people and going there. I have stopped asking this question as I कि ऐसा हो सकता है, because I know it has not happened. So I just don't ask that question to my panelists. But there is one more thing which has happened. I would like your attention. The bench also comprises Justice J.B. Pardiwala and Manoj Mishra. They said in order, all learned counsel appearing have fairly stated it would be appropriate if a status report is placed before the court for its perusal by the state of Manipur in respect of August 7 direction, which the Solicitor General has agreed to do so. Having regard to the sensitivity of the issue, it has been agreed that presently the status report shall be made available only for the perusal of the court. Any reason for this?
Well, I think, if the content is made public, it has the potential of, creating further tension. Because if you want a very honest report, usually that honesty doesn't go down well with one community or other, or some community may or ethnicity may find a degree of fault as to how this report has been prepared. So this is the reason why the courts have asked for this report in a sealed cover, so only they can see and do a assessment, and if they have any issue they can seek clarification with the Solicitor General, because the state has said that they will cooperate on this particular issue. See, one of the other thing is that Kartikeya, the Home Ministry is meeting many people. Home Ministry is meeting various stakeholders, and it's not like that the government of India is not trying to do it, but somehow, how do I put it? Somehow it just doesn't kind of add up. So the effort,
चीजें बैठ नहीं रही हैं.
and there is no effort on the part of the civil societies, which usually would have done good work and all. But now the division is so deep that it's somehow they're not able to bring around.
I don't want to trivialize it. Partition जितना तो deep नहीं है ना. मेरा कहने का मतलब है deep है, but there is no partition which has taken. I think when India can come out of partition, and it has the potential to resolve all those issues. ये तो state का internal matter है. But before I go any further on this issue, Dr. Guite, you wanted to come in, and I have a question for you too. And my question is it fair to say, I'm sorry, if कि हम आपके साथ नहीं रहेंगे? Is it a fair thing to say? मैंने बहुत सारे सवाल ऐसे पूछे, I got run down कि आप केवल you take one side, but today I'm asking the questions from the other side. हम आपके साथ नहीं रहेंगे. Is it fair thing to say?
In a very simple way, I'll just answer that when you are in a toxic relationship, it's always better to stay away from that toxicity, because it just
it's not a relationship. We are all part of Union of India. It's part of Manipur, and you can say, Kartikeya, this is your typical middle class sensibility. Delhi में रहते हो और क्या सोचोगे? But I will say that I am feeling very नहीं हो सकता आप गुस्से में बोल दें मुझे. But there's a G20 happening. There's a G20 happening, Dr. Guite. There's a G20 happening. We are shepherding the agenda of the global south. One family, one planet, one resource. We are trying to do away with those broken system of Bretton Woods institutions. G20 is made to function in a different way. It's irrespective of anything. There's a lot at stake for India.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, if I remember, comparing the present ethnic violence, I remember drawing a simile with in one of your show with this is ethnic violence and it can be a domestic violence, So those kind of simile I have made. So now when coming to asking a separate, administration from the existing state government, here the point is, when the state government and the state police forces have failed to restore confidence in the minds of the people, LOCs will keep forming in the minds of people. And when state government lost faith in its own citizen, here let's be very specific. It should be lost faith in the cookies of people. The state government lost faith in its own citizen, the people, to be specific. It is the duty of the central government to take the situation in its own hands. Duty of removing this LOC lies with the government. And why are they not doing any effort? People did not create LOC. Let's be very clear. government created the LOC in the minds of people. International organizations can be criticized, but their reports cannot be totally washed away. But if Rami Desai is criticizing international organizations and remaining silent on the actions of Biren Singh government for state-sponsored violence, it is a very sad thing, and it's a tragedy for the state government.
I'm not defending Rami here.
I'm also not defending anyone, but this is the fact.
We are in a democracy. We can criticize the chief minister, deputy chief minister, all the ministers, but it's a different issue when you when you are sending petition to European Union, when petitions are sent to the European members of Parliament. It boils down to different things. Rami, I want you to take that question. There's a G20 thing happening, and it's like they're on the platter.
Karthikeya, first of all, I have to say, thankfully, I don't need anybody to defend me. I'm very capable of defending myself.
I'm saying I'm not defending you, Rami. I said I'm not defending you.
I know. This is for Dr. Goethe. I don't think anybody needs to defend anybody here. But on a serious note, I think what needs to be defended is the territorial integrity of the state. Now, we can keep harping about and saying that it is only in our imagination. Madam, if it was only in our imagination, people would be able to cross that line of border, this imaginative line of border. Unfortunately, we are not able to cross it. Therefore, it is not in the imagination. This has percolated down to something more evil, which is an actual line of control, which is even scary to talk about, because this is not the kind of divisions we should have, And like I said earlier on, that, as much as, cookies should feel safe enough in staying in the valley, the same way, the Meiteis should be able to move around wherever. Why should they be confined to a valley? But I hear myself saying this. I don't hear you saying this. Number two, at a time like G20, do we really need to embarrass our nation? Haven't we embarrassed our nation enough by calling on international organizations and defending them on national media, saying that I have an objection with them? Of course I have an objection with them. When you have not studied this region, when you don't know anything about the people, when you're superimposing false binaries, forget me, you should have an objection with it. When they don't know their subject matter, so many people have a problem with a non-Manipuri talking about Manipur, but you don't have a problem with an international organization talking about Manipur. I think that is hypocrisy. And as for this country going through one of its most important moments as a global leader through this G20, wherein we are putting our best foot forward, do we need to show the people who have come here as our guests that we don't have control over our own state affairs? Yes, surely this conflict, needs accountability. I've never said that we must not ask for accountability, whether it's from the state government or if it's from civil society. I have laid responsibility equally on both shoulders. So I don't think that accusation of yours that I'm not asking for accountability from the state government stands, because that is what I've asked for from day one. But again, I don't hear you asking for accountability from your community. But let's not make this about you or me. Let's make this about the country. Let's make this about the territorial integrity of this country. Let's make it about the reputation of this country, which is very well equipped to manage its own affairs. I don't see any community from Manipur interfering in international events. So why do we accept? Are you then accepting that you are not capable as a community to find solutions for yourself, that you are looking out for external agencies to do that? That is not really the act of a responsible citizen. And I would never do that. And I don't think much of this nation appreciates that. Therefore, for the sake at least of better narratives being built, I think these are dialogues that we must cast away immediately.
Professor Prasanjit, I want you in.
Yes, I would say that, we should not have an alarmist position about use of a word, because that perpetrates or perpetuates a sense of insecurity in a larger sense. No one has endangered territorial integrity of Manipur so far, or any part of Northeast or any part of India, except in certain conflict zones. Now, internal conflicts and external territorial integrity are totally different thing. Here it's a question of internal strife and conflict, which unfortunately has happened. and state of India, central government has a major role to stop these communities from fighting. But has that happened? It hasn't happened. Off and on, intermittently, there is some kind of logic of retaliation that is still at work. And we know from May 3rd onward, the display of violence, the display of heartlessness, cruelty has reached to such an extent. And then if somebody tries to provoke and enter into a zone where people are trying to live peacefully and not have any insecurity, that is also an act of provocation. So all this is not really healthy, I would say. What should have been healthier is to think about rescuing people, is to see that victims get proper reparation, is to see that there is no non-refoulement, no refoulement of anyone, of Meitei or any Kuki victim. And there is no civil society mobilization to create another fresh point. Central security forces are standing in between. Let us respect that in-betweenness of the central security forces, so that there is no sneaking into each other's area and causing another act of violence. So that is primarily important from the security point of view. So that is where we need to be very cautious, and we did not create a situation whereby people differ on maintaining absolute security and peace at this moment in Manipur.
Okay, Rami, you want to come in?
Karthikeya, of course, as Professor Biswas said, and I think we all have always from day one agreed that, it is very important to bring peace first. This is one of the first comments I made on your debate when the protests were happening, that was saying solution first and peace later. I said that is completely unacceptable because peace has to come first. And I also said today that, this sort of march is absolutely provocative and could have been avoided because things are still sensitive right now. But coming to the point of LOC, sir, I must very respectfully disagree that this is not being an alarmist. The state government or the central government has not used the word LOC. Therefore, no community, no society and no group has the right to use this sort of language. And if you are going to use this language, then do not blame larger populations who are observing this conflict from calling a spade, because that is, if you're putting it in writing, then that is what we are going to read it as. If the situation is so sensitive, then this sort of nomenclature also should be avoided. Why should it not be, out of the ambit of provocation? If a march is provocation, so is the usage of LOC.
And secondly, Professor, I'll add one thing, I know it might sound controversial. Often, politics and movement of justice can also create narratives of violence. And Naxalism is the best example in case. It created an imagery of justice, equality, progress. But it created violence. Didn't?
Yes.
Didn't?
Justice,
It did.
yes, sure. Justice and the idea of good taken out of context by Naxalites and extremists, in order to popularize it and in order to create a kind of mass uprising is something that institutional democracy doesn't allow. We have our institutional processes within which one has to seek justice. That is very, very important. No debate on that.
Absolutely. No debate on that. Absolutely.
Yes, as far as Ms. Desai is concerned, I would still say that one need not be much alarmed, because that LOC has come in a moment, in a flow of conflict, Both these sides are using this kind of language. I wish that both these sides do not use such a language. Language
Professor,
conflict.
Professor,
Yes.
the reason why I took up this issue is, I remember, Ram, you remember when I said कि बड़ी गलत बात है, every cookie is being called a poppy cultivator. And I said ये बड़ी गलत बात है, आप ऐसे कैसे कह सकते हैं ये poppy cultivator है. उसी तरीके से ये कुकीज जो भी एसोसिएशन की चीज को राइट नहीं है टू कॉल इट लाइन ऑफ कंट्रोल. They don't have that right. It should be criticized. जैसे कि you can't call every cookie a poppy cultivator. गलत बात है. It's othering them. You can't say it's line of control. ये गलत बात है. Dr. Gupta, you wanted to come in? Sorry, I missed it.
I just want to make one point. When central government and the state government are not listening, people will look for some relief, right? Right or wrong. So if the international organization having a ground reporting and having their own authenticity of fact checking and verifying. So if they are on the ground, so what is the problem in listening to them if the central and the state government are not listening? So this is my point which I wanted to make. And peace cannot be secured by moving tens of thousands of armed people to the locality of other community. Like the action of Konkomi is a clear act of treason against the country. Why no FIR is ordered against them? I mean, there can be many things, you know, if you say this.
Today I just wanted to locate my debate. You know, Monday I located on that Editors Guild of India. I took a position on it. I said FIR nahi hogi, पर report ठीक नहीं है गुरु. United Nation वाली report को मैंने कहा boss, they are creating a false narrative against India. ये गलत है. Today this report is ये line of control गलत है. It should be criticized. नहीं हो सकता इस्तेमाल. Rami, quickly.
Arthike, first of all, I don't think international organizations have any ground report. I think they reported sitting from, you know, their anthropological armchairs where they were judging us.
Drawing room report थी. Drawing room report है.
Drawing room report, and that kind of report, you know, would really not be accepted from anybody in any established institution or by any established academician. Having said that, the Editors Guild also only had 3 days. All right, and I don't know what their background is, whether they understand Manipur, whether they understand the nuances, but obviously it was a shoddy job. You know, I disagree with you in terms of the fact that I think when things are this sensitive, I think, journalists like this who come with vested interests have a right to be shown the mirror because this is national security at stake. We are not talking about any, any other state. We are talking about a state that lies on a very crucial boundary, and any sort of conflict on that not just hurts the state but hurts all of the country, which is where my interest comes in. But having said that, again, my point is that as much as we want to minimize this sort of usage and we want to say that one community feels scared of the other, I mean, honestly, this is no way forward. At sometimes, the usage of the word brother is used that, the Metis should behave like elder brothers. The other times it is said, we can't have them anywhere close to us. There has to be some sort of geographical line. So this sort of hypocrisy is not going to help us move forward.
Only thing I would say, only thing I really I believe is that not only arms have to come back, but there has to be audit where the arms went. Coming back of the arms, this audit should be true for both the communities. ये audit होना चाहिए, गए कहाँ नहीं, किसके पास गए और कितने दिन रहे, उसका audit होना चाहिए और वो audit public होना चाहिए. मुझे लगता है कि I hope some intervention takes place at the highest level और वो होना चाहिए. But I also feel in end I would say, and we can debate it tomorrow day after, that this line of control and we cannot stay, it should not be encouraged. One has to stay together. There is no option. But as an individual, people can accuse me of being a middle class. Yes, that I am. Okay. My roots are in my rootlessness. Yes, I am. And in that rootlessness, I identify with the larger good of the country. I know Professor is smiling at me. I know, but he understands where I'm coming from. He understands where I'm coming from. But I feel very sad. G20 हो रहा है यार. We are shepherding global south यार. हम लोग we are there. We are being acknowledged. And I think at least for some, we really need to set this aside. We are out there. This is my conclusion. What is India battling? Chinese expansionism, American nativism, European protectionism, post-Brexit, Britain, and a Russian war. उसके बीच में हम हैं with G20. I think as an Indian, our responsibility is to pitch, renegotiate that multilateralism which all these Bretton Woods institutions and all these North Hemisphere countries have broken it down, and seize the initiative for our place in the sun. That's what I feel today.
Chat GPT, It can generate codes and human-like responses through text, write stories, and do a lot more.
I work in a newsroom with anchors, researchers and scriptwriters, graphic artists, producers, video editors, camera crew. But does a newsroom really need them today?
All of us have to think about unique and distinctive value addition that cannot be automated or repeated or replaced by a machine.
ChatGPT may kill many companies.
A human has to be in the loop with an ability to control this.
Dark Side of the Boom. Streaming now.
Right now,